Live. You're live.
That has been a question this morning.
Yes.
Are we actually live or are we not? But
You're live on YouTube.
live in the YouTube sphere.
We shall be live here. Actually, not live. We shall be recorded here.
We shall be recorded live.
Something went wrong. Well, what else is new? And now it's working? Yes. Okay. I'm going to start this one over just in case. I don't like it when things go wrong. Okay, go away.
Thanks for hanging with us, YouTube.
They're used to it. What went wrong? I don't know.
Y'all the ballers.
Okay, that looks more normal.
Got our OG ballers on YouTube.
Okay, hello.
Hello.
Everybody.
Salutations.
Something did not go wrong this time.
Well, isn't that
Hello.
nice?
Hello, Jack. Thanks for joining us.
Jack and I had the softball game last night.
Nice.
It was great to see them after all that they have been having to deal with.
Did you win?
So on another subject, we had a really good time. The ice cream was great afterwards.
The weather yesterday was great.
Oh, it was beautiful. It was like a 20-degree drop from the
Yeah.
previous game. So I think it was like 87 last time and 67 last night. And I'm a big fan of 67 myself. That's right in my wheelhouse.
Mhm.
You know,
It rained a little bit in the morning. It was great.
when it gets too hot, I want to kill people, which
Well,
probably is a violation of the Sixth Commandment.
probably.
Probably.
Not probably. 100%.
100% a violation of the Sixth Commandment.
But also felt.
What is the Sixth Commandment?
Thou shalt not kill.
Yeah. So Deuteronomy 5:17, we're in the midst of this. We've been, look at us, we're getting like to it.
All it
It
took was
doesn't-
softball and crippling depression for me, and then I am ready to go.
I think we'll deal with the sidebars later, and we'll end up talking about nonsense. But as we're getting going in this
At 25 minutes in.
right out of the gate, usually we talk about nonsense for 25 minutes and get 5 minutes of content. Deuteronomy 5:17 in the NIV is you shall not murder. And so as we are working through this series in Deuteronomy and specifically this little mini series in the Ten Commandments, so we've been going through this, we saw in the first, people often divide it into two tables, the first table of the law dealing with our relationship to God, and then the second table dealing with our relationships to one another, or however you want to describe those things. And we kind of looked at the fifth commandment as a bridge between those two things. So it's the whole setting here is Moses reminding the children of Israel as they're about to go into the promised land, they're about to take this new step. All of Deuteronomy is this. He's reminding them of the covenant that they have with God to live wholeheartedly for him. And so through the Ten Commandments as the foundation of this covenant that he established with them at Mount Sinai, or Mount Horeb, as Moses calls it here, then we see that expanded and expounded and exposited. I got a lot of X's in here throughout the rest of the book about what does it look like to apply the truth of God's commands that reflect his character in the various settings, various areas of life, because the command for God's people is not just to be holy to him, set apart for him and different from the world in a religious setting, but in all aspects of life, whatever you're doing, to live wholeheartedly for God. And so we saw that it was established on the fact that God is God. I am the Lord God. Lord, let me try this again. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. And then he goes into the no other gods, no graven images, no idols. Do not misuse the name of the Lord. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, to keep it separated. So we on the Sabbath you don't work, but it's not just like a day off. It's doing this unto the Lord as a reminder of our dependence on him. And then honor your father and mother, which is what we saw as kind of the bridge from here's how we both reflect and learn what it means to honor God, to submit to his authority. And then we pick up with these more straightforward direct, quick punches. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet. So all of these things are bam, 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 and they're the horizontal echo of the vertical reality as we are as we're living wholeheartedly for God. We're worshiping Him alone, and we're focused on Him. Our wholehearted love for Him then overflows, expresses itself in a wholehearted love for those around us, which precludes then these prohibitions. I can't murder people and love them at the same time. So if my love for others is an expression of my love for God, then I can't murder. I can't commit adultery. I can't lie about my neighbor. I can't bear false testimony. I can't let myself, and I think because the coveting is more of a mental. Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount would say all these are internal things, but with coveting, it's really more of a root internal thing that you see. Don't want what you don't have. Don't have that. Don't set your desires on things that belong to somebody else. Sure. Be satisfied. Be contented with what God has given you, which is another message for another time. But in this one, you shall not murder. We see that the value behind it, or the reality behind it, is how we view life as a reflection of how we view God. And so the core reality we talked about was that wholehearted living for God values life as He does.
And
so
I think that was an approach that opened my eyes a little bit, because, I think I mentioned it a few weeks ago here on the podcast. Like, there are some of these commandments that we look at specifically. I think, don't murder. Like, well, that's easy enough. But when you break it down into, well, not murdering is more than just, not getting stabby.
Right.
It's valuing life the way God values life. And there's so many facets of that to
even down to not letting myself feel stabby. Right.
Right.
So that, it's one thing,
which may be the hardest of all.
So in reality, you may have had people in your life that if all restraints were removed, you might want dead.
Right.
You might make you feel some stabbiness. In all likelihood, you're not actually going to act on that and kill them. But the internal part, that's where Jesus makes that connection, is if you're feeling stabby, just because your hand didn't do it, it doesn't change anything.
Right.
So, and that's kind of the nature of these prohibitive commands. Is we were just looking at this in Bible study this morning in Romans. We're in chapter 3, and as Paul is talking about the reality that we can't be made right by the law. Mm-hmm. Rather, the law makes us aware, gives us a knowledge of sin. So what the law does, these prohibitive commands, it says, you don't do this because this is contrary to it. So essentially, the law just gets us to the baseline. You haven't done anything wrong, you haven't done anything right. But righteousness is a positive thing. It's more than that. So again, it's not really righteousness if I can keep the law by being in a coma, right? If I just go to sleep and don't wake up,
right,
and I'm in a coma for 6 months, and I have 6 months of I haven't killed anybody, I haven't committed adultery, I haven't made any graven images, all these things. Okay, so I haven't worked on the Sabbath because I haven't done anything. I'm in a coma, or coma if I have a stuffiness.
Coma.
But that's not righteousness. That's not the same thing. And so when we look at these prohibitions, then it's important for us to recognize that there is a positive implication that goes along with that negative command. So, that's kind of a big deal, really.
Slightly. You talked about and I mean, it's not necessarily new, but I think maybe because it's shoved in our face more often than not today, this culture of death that we seem to be surrounded by. It's a big focus for a lot of people, and I think a lot of people don't even realize that.
Well, it was only a few weeks ago on the podcast that you were like, culture of death. What
right, but when you explained it, I'm like, yeah, that tracks. Yeah. And I was even thinking, one thing you didn't mention Sunday, and maybe I'm totally off base here, But if you look at the rise of mental health issues in our country alone, and you look at suicides,
Yeah.
I wondered.
It's actually on my list, and I skipped it because I was way long.
Well, I was like, shoot, I wondered about that.
Yeah.
Because I've heard, growing up in church, whatever, that suicide is a sin, and
Right.
I get it. It makes perfect sense to me why it would be.
Well, and especially in the Catholic tradition and other traditions like that, that's a final sin,
right?
Because you can't repent of it.
Right.
You can't, get your last rites, prior
Sure.
to that. You are committing an unforgivable sin that, that's an immediate damnation.
And that's obviously a subject that nobody wants to,
Right.
talk about, but it happens a lot.
Yeah. So we probably don't need to spend a ton of time on the whys and the wherefores, the principles of some of the stuff that we talked about
Sure.
on Sunday. We can do a quick recap just to catch everybody up that maybe wasn't there or wasn't listening.
Well,
But
I think our live stream cut out a few times. So
yeah, we've been having a couple of issues here where we think we've got it figured out, at least the main problem figured out. Anyhow, maybe we can get into some of the specific content that I truncated. Like I said, suicide was on my list of things to talk about, and for the sake of time.
Well, that just goes to show
this.
this culture of death is a big thing.
It really is.
So there's
yeah.
too much to talk about.
So as we were talking about it, the basic principles, and I spent way more time on creation stuff than what I intended to. Just insider, inside baseball stuff here. When I have a less scripted, this, but those who are listening perhaps don't. When I don't have a full manuscript or a fuller manuscript, then some
You're
of
off
the
to the
thoughts
races.
start coming out that if I had written them down, I might have said, okay, shorten this,
Right.
or taken it out. The writing isn't hard, it's the editing.
Right.
And so one of the things, when you remove the leash, the dog's going to run. That's kind of what happened. So anyway, so one of the key things that we saw in this principle that wholehearted living for God values life as he does, we see that God alone is the giver and Lord of life, right? And we see in Genesis 1, these first 2 points really draw heavily from Genesis 1 and 2. God alone is the giver and Lord of life. Since he creates life, he gives life, he is in charge of life. He's the boss. He gets to call the shots. Secondly, we saw that human life is unique among God's creation. We are the only element of God's creation that he created in his own image. And so the language is used differently. It's specified in Genesis 2 that he breathed into man and he became a living spirit or a living being. And so he breathed his own spirit into us. Now, it's entirely possible that there is something that's not unique in that God made animals living beings as well. But the fact that the account in Genesis specifically separates human account, specifically uses the phrase that isn't used with the rest of it. God speaks things into existence, but with man, he breathes into him. He forms from the dust and then breathes his spirit into him. There's something unique there. The fact that we're specifically told that we're created in God's image, that and the fact that we see everything is good. He creates man in his image, and it's very good.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a uniqueness among God's creation, and the rest of the scripture reflects that. Humankind is the only element of creation that God redeems through the Savior. There is a redemption that will come in the end, because all of humankind is cursed by. All of creation is cursed by the sin of man. So all of creation in man's redemption will be redeemed in the new heavens and new earth. That will all come. But creation is not being redeemed from the sin of creation. The trees didn't do anything wrong. The soil didn't do anything wrong. The elk and the antelope and the leopard and the lion, they didn't do anything wrong. But they're all affected by our sin. Man alone was given dominion. Mm-hmm. So God creates us in his image. He gives us his delegated authority to rule in his behalf. And so as we look at that, the uniqueness of humankind among God's creation is it's a base, it's a bedrock for this principle of the sanctity of human life, which is why we have the command not to murder. And corollary to that is that the one who gives life has the authority to take it, and only that one. So God creates life, and we saw in Job, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. And so when we see this, God brings death, God gives life. He's authorized to do that because he is self-authorizing. He created it, he can do with it as he pleases. We're not. I don't have the right to do this unless God delegates that right. And so there are circumstances that we'll talk about in a few minutes where God does grant the government the authority for capital punishment, for example. There are things along that line. But ultimately, the only one who has the right to take a life is God and those to whom he delegates that right, which is always a temporary delegation. But then we talked earlier, we already kind of alluded to this, that murder is more than merely the act of killing. There is a mentality that goes along with it. There's an attitude of the heart, and Jesus gets to that while the law, the governing magistrate deals with external behaviors and must deal with external behaviors, God deals with the heart. And so our sin, again, we were just having this conversation. It's amazing how much Romans and Deuteronomy parallel each other. But we were just having this conversation in Bible study this morning that all sin is not the same. We often will say that in evangelical world, this Protestant mentality that, well, all sin is the same. There's no difference between your sin and my sin and this sin and that sin. Well, that's not true. And we all know intuitively that's not true. So there's a big difference between feeling stabby and being stabby, right? And there's a big difference between, I just really want that person dead, and then actually killing them. Right. And the law deals with the actual part. But the Lord deals with the heart. The Lord deals with that internal part. So while adultery, Jesus says, if you've looked at someone lustfully with that lust in your heart, you've committed adultery internally. Right. But the law addresses the adultery externally. And I think most of us can recognize we might be able to forgive somebody for, looking the wrong way at somebody or having, different ideas. That's a lot different than when they actually go and act on those ideas. Right. It's a different thing. All sin separates us from God, but not all sin has the same consequences, right? So, and you can see that in 100 different ways. If I go into that, we'll spend all our time talking about that, so I won't. But the idea that murder is more than merely the act of killing speaks to that mental aspect and the reality that the prohibitive law has a positive implication, that the prohibition implies its necessary opposite. So by saying, don't do this, saying this is a bad thing, the opposite of this, the good thing is to do the opposite of this. So then we have to figure out what that is. Well, is the opposite not killing? Well, it's more than that. The opposite is to value life. And so when we say a thing is bad, then saying that this is bad is implicitly saying that the good is the logical opposite of that thing. So that's kind of what leads us in to the broader picture of the culture of death dishonors the Lord of life. If we look at life and death through our human understanding, well, who rules this world? It's the prince of this world. So for this time, we recognize that the enemy of our souls is actually dominating the thinking of the created order. And so when we live according to this world order that is set against God, that raises ourselves up against the knowledge of God, and we begin to think according to our own understanding rather than trusting the Lord with all our heart, then we're being conformed, we're being pressed into the mold of the world around us. Right. And that world around us is a culture that portrays right as wrong and wrong as right, and it's dominated by sin. It's dominated by selfishness. It's dominated ultimately by the influence of the devil, right? And so if, as Jesus said, that the devil's desire is murder and lies. In John 8:44, he said, "You belong to your father, the devil. You want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there's no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native tongue, for he's a liar and the father of lies." Jesus went on in John 10 to say, "The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I've come that they may have life and to have it to the full." So this picture of the contrast between death and life ultimately is an encapsulation of the darkness and unrighteousness of sin, humanity, and the devil himself, the enemy of our souls, versus the light and life that is God's nature, that is found in Christ himself. God has the power over death because he is the giver of life. So anything that is separated from him as the source of life then has death, right? But the devil loves death and he deceives people into it.
And aren't these things ultimately just one way or another people playing God? I mean, when we
For sure, yeah.
when we
We use that term for kind of specific things, but really that's what we're
this
talking
is,
about
right.
with all of it. Even with the nature of sin, when I determine I'm in control, I
Right.
can do what I want. I live my life the way I want to. I know that there are rules and there are church authorities. I don't care about that. I'm going to do my thing, and I don't have to listen to those who are older and wiser. I don't have to listen to anybody's moral, things. What we're doing is we are playing God. We are making ourselves out to be God, as if we control things.
And we'd never say that, or most of us wouldn't say that, but that's the case. You mentioned one thing on Sunday about, I think it's gained more popularity in the last 10 to 20 years, is people essentially deciding when they're going to die, and
Absolutely, yeah.
euthanasia type thing. And
I don't know if you're old enough to remember Jack Kevorkian.
I was going to say Dr.
Yeah.
Kevorkian. My grandma used to say, "Oh, I would do that if there's," and we were like, and even as a kid, I was like, "That's weird."
Not one of Michigan's more honorable
Yeah.
citizens.
But he was kind of the big name in that
Right.
thing.
Yeah, he was at the forefront.
And
of
now
a lot of that.
in pop culture, I don't know if you heard about Ozzy and Sharon Osbourne.
No, I
They apparently,
knew we'd get to some pop culture eventually.
yeah, they apparently have this. Ozzy's not well, I guess, at all. He's,
in fairness, Ozzy wasn't well when he was
true,
well. So.
but I guess he's got like really bad Parkinson's and
Okay.
everything else. But they've made this essentially a suicide pact that, when he's ready to go, they're going to fly to Switzerland and basically kill themselves at the same time, or have it done by somebody.
Which isn't surprising,
Right?
When you don't. So Ozzy Osbourne is not known for his for his faithfulness to God.
Sure.
Right. True of a lot of celebrities and rock and roll stars and stuff. And if your worldview is that there is no God, or God is a concept, and we are the masters of our own fate, our own soul, and we don't have to worry about life after death.
Right.
We don't have to worry about an accountability to a holy God. Then when suffering becomes something that's in front of us and we don't see a way out of that, ending that suffering makes sense.
I mean,
right?
I get, you look at people like with ALS or whatever that are
Yeah.
going to have a really bad road ahead of them no matter what.
Absolutely.
Nobody wants to do that. But it's, again, playing God. And even if you don't believe in God, it's just.
Yeah, it really is saying I get to control
Right.
these things.
That's
And,
wild to me.
I mean, we've talked about the control thing in so many other areas of
Right.
life, and it really is the same dynamic, right? We have this so much of depression and anxiety comes from the lack of control.
Mhm.
I want to be able to make this what I think it should be.
Right.
It isn't. I can't seem to do anything about it. So anxiety is that fear that comes from that the what ifs, what if this goes wrong? And depression it really is anxiety going over the falls. And I'm no longer afraid of it. I've just
Right.
kind of resigned
Depression
myself
becomes
to
almost hopelessness.
exactly.
Yeah.
So despair is the extreme end of that leads to suicide. But it's like nothing even matters anymore
Right.
because it's just so bad. I don't even care. And so we give up on things. And all of this comes from, or at least is noticeably significantly connected to, maybe coming from it is a little bit of an overstatement, but it's intricately tied to our desire for control.
Mhm.
That
Makes
not trusting God. So we talk about trusting God a lot of times, almost as if it's a feeling,
Right.
and it's the exact opposite of a feeling. Faith and feeling are not the same.
Mm.
Faith can change our feelings, but our feelings cannot change our faith, because faith is what I do in the face of those feelings. When I feel the anxiety, when I feel the depression, when I feel the despair, when I feel the anger, then what?
Mhm.
So trusting God is a choice to say, I see what's happening here and it's bad and I don't see a way out of it. And I don't think it's going to get better. And I just feel hopeless. Yet, as David said, I will put my hope in God. I will try. I don't have hope on my own. I will hope in him. I will not allow my soul to be downcast. I will not allow myself to rely on the affective feelings, because that's a response to the circumstances. Rather than reacting to the stimuli of these circumstances, I'm going to decide, which is what Job does. I'm going to decide God is better, God is bigger, and I don't have to have this go the way I think it should. That's not easy,
Mm-mm. Nope.
but it is volitional. It's not a feeling. And again, we can see that in basic intuitive ways. Not feeling stabby, as you put it earlier, not feeling that murderous hatred and anger that Jesus talks about. That's a lot harder to deal with, because that takes a roundabout approach to
Yeah.
change those feelings. But it is still an approach. It's a choice to trust God. Before I even get to that, I have to make a choice not to act on those feelings.
Right.
And most of us do, right? We can restrain our behaviors and say, I think maybe it would be wiser for me to not stab you to death right now. So I'm going to not. I want to,
But wouldn't you
but I'm
argue
not going
that
to.
the biggest motivator against that is just because I don't want to get caught and get
Absolutely.
in trouble? I don't want to go to jail, so that's why I'm not.
That's one of
doing
the
it.
primary purposes of law. It instructs us, but it also restrains our behaviors. So and that's what the government does in its role in restraining evil. We've changed that in modern times. We try to rehabilitate and try to do all these different sorts of things to deal with the heart, but we can't deal with the heart. God does.
Right.
And we can't fix those things while at the same time denying God's hand in it.
Mhm.
That's never going to work. It's just not how it works. So when we look at Israel and their law governs the heart. It governs the behavior, but it also governs the heart, because God is in direct rule with them. So they're answering to God, and even the Sanhedrin or Moses or Joshua, the king, they represent God. So in that theocratic approach, you can require a heart issue. Now, the issue for humans is I can't see your heart, right? I can't see what's going on inside of you. God can. When we're talking about regular human government, particularly a secular government like ours, the idea, this is where I always get griped about hate speech. If you murdered somebody, hate crimes, if you murdered somebody, did you do it because you liked them and you were being nice to them? No, although we convince ourselves that in the culture of death. It's a hateful thing, period.
Right.
So when I start to measure, when I have somebody who's not God try to tell me what your motives are in your heart, what you intended, and it's a worse murder because you didn't like their skin color or whatever else, you didn't like their gender, or because you had some manifesto. So suddenly this murder is a worse murder because you had feelings.
Right.
That's the government's never going to be effective at that. God is. Let God deal with that. But the government and us as humans have the responsibility of restraining the behaviors,
Right.
and let God take care of the rest. We can choose for ourselves then, in the face of our feelings, to say, okay, I'm going to renew my mind with God's truth. This is what I feel. This is what I'm thinking right now based on my feelings. I can't control the feelings, but I can control the thoughts. I can say, listen, self, that's not right. It might feel that way. The circumstances might be, but I'm denying that God is in control, and I'm trying to put myself in control, or I'm despairing because I'm not in control and I
Right.
can't fix it. So therefore, I have to choose to go beyond my feelings to trust God. And that is a challenging sort of thing. So when we're talking about suicide, which euthanasia, we've kind of separated them. It is
Right.
the same thing.
Right.
I'm choosing to end my own life
On my terms.
on my terms, and I can sell it as dignified death and all these different marketing schemes that we use for. Sad that we use marketing schemes in this culture of death. Um, that's a very different thing than how you handle like a do not resuscitate
Right.
order or removing artificial life support. So in the euthanasia or suicide, you're taking action to end a life.
Right.
I am putting myself in God's role. In the removal of artificial life support or do not resuscitate, I am putting it in God's hands.
Sure.
And saying, I will no longer try to prolong artificially this life. I'm going to let God do what God's going to do. Or as people like to say, let nature take its course. And if God chooses to end this life, then God does that. And I'm not going to fight it. So those are not the same. And sometimes in our culture, we lump them together.
Yeah.
I think that's, again, a tool of the enemy, that he wants us to lump them together so we don't see the distinction between them. But it's the attitude toward life and who is sovereign over that life that governs all the rest of it. So when we're talking about abortion, can we look at it and say, well, the woman has, how it's sold so many different ways, all coming down to this personal autonomy. And ultimately, however,
My body, my choice.
right, however you spin it, it comes down to I'm God,
Right.
not God.
Yep.
I don't see how this is going to be good. Therefore, I'm going to take this action. There were some churches that signed on at one point, and I won't mention those denominations, a few decades ago, supporting a pro-choice perspective with the Supreme Court, encouraging them to it might not have been the Supreme Court, it might have been with Congress, but they were encouraging them to embrace a pro-choice perspective for the good of the child. That it would be better for that child to be aborted, to be, let's take the euphemisms away, killed, murdered, than to live in a situation where they might have poverty,
Right.
they might have suffering. Well, all of us might have a lot of things.
Or the mother might.
Or the mother might.
Be dying of something.
And especially now, we like to really push, well, what about the health of the mother? That we are arguing from the exception to make the rule.
Or you look at, well, they were raped, or they're,
Right.
and those are all horrible things.
Absolutely. But she's not less raped because the child is killed.
Right.
All you've done is now you've stacked evil upon evil.
Right.
So an evil person did an evil thing and you're the victim of that. So now you become someone who does an evil thing. That's not good logic. But that's how a lot of women have been deceived. But they've been told this from those who would promote the culture of death, from the enemy of our souls. And so we have thousands, more than thousands of women. Just the number that I have dealt with in a small life in a small community, the number of people that I've dealt with where women are plagued with guilt 20 years later because they know. They can say it however they want to say it, but they know that there was a life inside of me and I ended that.
Right.
Even if it wasn't my hand that did it, it was the doctor or whatever. I don't think that's going to get better as we have moved away from the majority of abortions now are chemical abortions through the abortion pill stuff. And so there are a lot of problems that go along with that really probably aren't pertinent to the cast today. But what you are having is women who are making this decision without a voice of reason helping them, because we've removed more and more restrictions that were in place to restrain evil. And the more we remove those restraints, like you said earlier, the thing that keeps you from doing that terrible thing is the stigma, the fear, the potential of being caught, the punishment that go along with that. If you're not at a place where your worldview and your convictions tell you to do the right thing, then the restraint of evil through law
Mhm.
will put you in a situation that makes it much less likely. We've removed that. So now with Roe versus Wade overturned, abortion's not different.
Right.
It will be tracked differently because much more of that happens through mail order things that used to be prescriptions. Now you don't have to have a doctor's prescription. You can get all these different things that that end the life of this child. And that's the thing with in vitro fertilization too. There's a lot of folks talking about IVF. Most folks that most folks can't afford it.
Right.
So it's you got to come up with some money to do it because it's expensive. So is adoption. Unfortunately, I wish that it weren't, and there are ways to deal with that. I'm no expert on it, but the technology allows for in vitro fertilization to create an embryo at a time. That's not what we do.
Right.
We create multiple embryos, and then we select from them the
Right.
ones that we're going to implant, and then the rest are either stored, cryogenically frozen, or destroyed.
Yeah.
And stored and then ultimately destroyed.
Right.
This is an inhumane thing because we don't want to acknowledge that life begins at conception when
Right.
God creates life.
And there's the argument for so many, but anyway, we don't have time to get into that today.
But it does, and it shows up in our entertainment choices.
Yeah.
When
Oh,
we
yeah.
when we listen to songs that celebrate violence and anger, when
Mhm.
we watch movies and TV shows that celebrate violence and anger. I've never watched Dexter, but I see commercials for this all the time. My understanding, and if I'm wrong, whatever. But my understanding is this is a TV series now, a reboot of it, where the main character is a serial killer.
Well, and they try to put a positive spin on it because he kills bad people.
Yeah.
So
So this then promotes
Yeah.
in us
right.
a culture of death where we get to decide as individuals when it's morally right to go
Right.
ahead and do this.
Yeah.
And it's a sliding scale.
Yeah.
Which is why God says, I'm the giver and Lord of life. You shall not murder.
I've always been fascinated by that. Now that I think, these we're way over time, but like these serial killers throughout history.
Yeah.
Jack the Ripper happened, how many years ago, and people still make movies about him and talk about it. It's not, I don't want to say it's celebrated, but
It kind of is. We
we're
kind of glorify
fascinated
it.
by
We
by all of it.
romanticize
Sure.
things like that.
Right.
Even like vampires.
Right, yeah.
We make it a romantic kind
Right.
of thing. And this whole dynamic, when we fill ourselves with things that are against God's will and God's word, it hardens us to truth. It steers us in a direction that is going to lead us against God.
We will stop there because obviously we can talk more about it. But as Rich said before, I think we've got our technological issues
Hopefully.
all squared away. So if you're not in the area, feel free to join us on Sunday mornings via live stream on YouTube or Facebook.
This week, we're going to take a little break from our Deuteronomy series
Oh, I
to
didn't know
talk
that.
about wholehearted community and look at baptism and membership.
Because I was thinking, man, this week's going to be rough.
Yeah,
But that's good. A break is good. But yeah, feel free to join us on the live stream on Facebook or YouTube. And we'll continue on after this week. And next week, Rich is going to be gone. So we're going to do things remotely, but he's going
we're
somewhere
going to have a
cool.
good time.
So, all right. We will catch you guys later. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sticking with us, YouTube.